and being able to see against different folks. So for example, we've removed PI data, by the way, but this learner is in history, and we're seeing how many times they've logged in, we're seeing how many clicks they've done, we're seeing how many minutes, and then of course the course grade. And then we know how they're doing against their cohort, which was huge for working with different student affairs professionals throughout the institution, and being able to say, okay, we've cohorted these first-gen students that we know are all living in Adelphi. And we know that we want to be able to give them this impact, the impact point. And so we were able to pull that at any time. An academic advisor or a student engagement coordinator can look at this and see where some folks are at certain times. We also can push. So based on how we've coded and built out our queries, we're able then to pull out information that's meaningful to the impact points throughout the institution. And so it's both a pull and push that we can build through it. So we'll talk a little bit about the learning movement visualizations.
There are three main views that we have in this dashboard. The first one would give you the completion and the percentage enrolled by each week, by each assignment, and how does the course progress looks like week over week. We would be able to point out how does the course progresses, where we can find out more drop-off points. And by doing this, we would be able to point out if there's anything that we need to correct in our assignments or in our course, is something that is not helping our learners learn better. This view would be helpful for instructional designers to plan out the course. Then we have the course activity view, where we have on the x-axis, how is the current grade on the course for each of the learners. And on the y-axis, we have the relative time that is spent in Canvas. There's a baseline as well, and we measure our students in comparison to the average time spent in Canvas by the cohort. We would be able to point out learners that have been spending more time in Canvas, but are relatively scoring lower grades. So we would be able to hold interventions for them. We are also able to have the sliders on this view. So if we want to look at the learners that have been spending, let's say 3 or 5 times of the average, but they're not scoring good score. And we would be able to take those learners out and hold interventions for them, or just assist them in what's happening with them. And this view would be helpful for instructional designers as well as success coaches to point out individual students. The student activity, it looks at how is each student in a course is progressing week over week. Are they on track? Are they off track? This on track and off track, this timeliness is based on their submission of assignments and their course participation. We're also able to compare this with the days that since their last activity in Canvas. So if you see a student that have been drifting and we see that they have not participated in Canvas in any way, let's say for like 20 days, we want to reach out to them and see what's happening. This view would be especially beneficial for our success coaches.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a chance to think a little bit about this. Does anyone have any questions so far on the product and how it was built? I know we have a couple of things on chat, so we'll check that as well. But I want to give y'all an opportunity. Yes, Paul is so helpful. We all love Paul. But I want to give everyone an opportunity to talk about how this could fit in your unit or in your work spaces. So we want to do just pairs up together and just talk a little bit for a couple of minutes about how data visualizations in this way for impacting student success could be meaningful in your spaces. I love the humming. I'm excited to hear as we report out about some ideas that came out of there. It's really great to hear. We'll go into, oh, it's not, there you go. We'll talk a little bit about development timeline. Now that some of y'all have identified spaces and places where you can use this, the next thing is then talking about actually building it, right? And what does that look like? Getting the data into your space in a meaningful way for you, and that extensive process that definitely couldn't have been done without all of her incredible hard work on that. And then also getting your stakeholders to work to do it, right? And like for them to actually see this as something to impact their everyday and what that looks like.
So the timeline for data gathering and implementing everything took about 6 months, and it's still ongoing. The first and foremost thing was to get a roster of all the learners that we would be serving. So that data lives in our Salesforce, and that process took about 2 to 3 weeks to identify what fields do we need, what is the level of granularity that we want to go to. In building that query, it took about like 1 week, but while we were identifying the fields, we found that some of the fields did not exist in Redshift. So we had to get that process going of pulling all those fields into Redshift. Apart from that, we looked at our Canvas data to look at the grades and all the gradebook activity and all the assignment activity. Since all those activities were already present in Canvas, we were able to pull it out and do a QA in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. While we were looking for Canvas activity data, we found that we never actually tracked it except for grade changes. So that process of actually finding all that activities that we were tracking, that we should be tracking in Canvas, and getting all that data into Redshift took about 3 months. Then the query creation took about 3 months, and it's still in progress of identifying how many logins does a learner have, how often are they logging in, what does their activity look like. And by activity, I mean every time they click on a module, they click on a syllabus, they submit an assignment. So every activity that they would do in Canvas, all of that activity is combined into some of the metrics that we have defined and pulled into our queries. Wherever there's data, there would be challenges. So we had a couple of challenges. First of all, it was the unavailability of some of the data in Redshift as we compare it to our Salesforce roster. So we have to identify those fields, get all those fields into Redshift. Second was the unavailability of Canvas live events. So the identification of those live events took some time. How do we get all those events? The events are not tracked historically, so we had only data from October 1st last year. So we do not have a ton of historical data on learners, but we are working on it. Then all the events are just consolidated into essentially like a data dump into one table. So we need to enrich that table and hopefully lessen our processing time. So that is one of the future works for this dashboard.
So we'll go back together in your groups of identifying where this could be and talk a little bit about what challenges you could foresee in your area. If you're on the AE side, by the way, Paul has written most of this into the poll. He's pulled logins, activities, stuff like that stuff. And now, because of all of the amazing stuff that she's done, Ellie now has those queries written. And so that means that in those two spaces, we already have the data process in AWS started, or at least the foundation of it, just to build on exactly what Pallavi was saying, the next iteration of work we're just going to do to help us enrich it. So in your pair scan, we want to talk a little bit about what could some of the challenges be about the data that you're with, and what could that look like in order to visualize it. All right, we're gonna run that in. And so who would like to share? Who would like to share some of the areas of how this could work in your space, and then maybe even some challenges and potential solutions for doing that? Any groups want to report out? I should preface this with when I was at WP Carey, I taught an upper class business leadership class, and so I'm not opposed to calling out people and be like, okay, here, you can share. Thank you so much.
Well, I have a question. I hope it's relevant, but I work for the Center for the Future.
So that's not happening right now, but the potential to build that is 100% there. Absolutely. So part of what happens with this is manual benchmarking. So not even just taking the course, in order to do an authentic interaction and intervention, you have to know how people are moving in the first place, right? We can't just assume it based on what we know, right? That in itself will ensure that you're building mechanisms into the intervention process. So what myself and a couple of user experience student workers have been doing since January is literally just manually benchmarking every single course within the learning enterprise, and then being able then to use that to impact how we're talking about spaces and places within the interaction. So the potential is 100% there. I could not have done what I did in WP Berry if I didn't intimately understand Math 117 and CIS 105 the way I did. If I didn't know that by a certain point, if you didn't have an A, you weren't going to make it. And so that, or D, or higher, you weren't going to make it. And so having that knowledge is how the impact works. And so it's a both and here. We're talking about the data, but then working with the folks that can use the data to make an impact. That's why visualization is so cool.
What were you using to manually benchmark?
Really sophisticated pivots. That's why Paul and Pallavi are amazing partners in this process. I could not have done this without their visualizations, without them building the queries, because otherwise this infrastructure just isn't there. So literally just going into Canvas, taking that gradebook CSV and running old school pivots is what I have to do for a really long time to build it. Until, of course, once the dashboard is live, it will actually build it for you. Yeah, and that's what's so important, right? But here's the thing, I'm not a data person, right? That was one of the things that we were joking about when we were preparing for this, is this is actually my first time ever talking about this dashboard to people who do data. And so I've always talked about it with people who do impact. And if you don't have someone like me who understands the importance of doing that, you have to be able to use these visualizations to do it. So when I would walk up to my colleagues in different spaces who, like, the idea of running a pivot terrifies them, right? And they're like, I haven't looked at a spreadsheet since like I was in college, right? And so you walk up to them and say, hey, look, I can actually give you this really cool scatter plot that can just like let you know who's doing well and who isn't, and then just give you a list of people you can do. It changed everything, right? That I could bring people along on the journey that felt like they could finally use data to do their everyday interactions the way they needed to. Yeah. So this is the room of people that would make it so that way someone doesn't come through those pivots, hopefully. Great questions. Anyone else? Any spaces that you can see this impacting? Or how about challenges with data? PeopleSoft gets fun with it, right? I can never figure out housing. So if anyone ever figures out how we can build housing into this, please give me a call and let me know. I would love to know. These great questions. Thank you. So going into the next portion, talking a little bit about stakeholders. This is so huge. I say 3 months to launch. I would say it's even longer, right? So when I first came into LE, like day one, I was talking about how I needed this dashboard in order to do the impact job that I need to do, right? But in order to go around what it looks like. So your product or your support team, right? So in LE and in Ed Plus spaces, right? We're looking at the folks who have to actually build our ed tech and get them a part of it. The same thing with on the ground immersion, you're looking at your support teams. So likely they're probably already doing interventions or already doing adaptations or already doing feedback loops. So make sure you identify your duplication and gaps within the systems that are there and get them to buy in, right? Like you're not challenging the system they already have, you're helping them improve it and what that looks like. The biggest thing too is the identification of integration points and what that looks like, right? So it's a very different conversation when I'm talking to the director of advising than I am talking to the director of housing. It's a very different conversation if I'm talking to the support coaches at Ed Plus than talking to the instructional designers within our team, right? So it's a very different conversation in those spaces and making sure that you identify how that integration point makes sense for what they're doing and their buy-in. For example, Pallavi was actually building out restrictions right now on this based on the different folks that we're going to have in the different spaces, because not everyone needs the data either. And that's the other thing too to think through is that maybe folks who don't know the data before you come into the conversation shouldn't have all the data because they might not be able to impact it in the way that you need them to, or that the students and learners need them to. Also your CRM usage, right? So AE, we're always going to lean into PeopleSoft, other spaces, Salesforce, right? And what that looks like. Your instructional design and course development, that's also your faculty, right? So we were able to use benchmarking within a particular course. I'm not going to name the course, then you might be able to know who it is. We were able to demonstrate how there was a certain population of cohorts that were not moving through the work and have that very difficult conversation in a way that was meaningful for that faculty member to understand, right? So that's the other thing too, is that what that looks like. For us in the room who knows about the different loops within this, right? You're talking about, we have to identify your external tool pushback, right? We all know that Inscribe isn't the best friend of LMS in the world, right? And what does that mean and what does that look like, and being able to identify that. So at LE right now, we're about to launch a pilot of testing actual assignments to push enrollment into different external tools. So that way we're making sure that we're closing those gaps in different spaces. Your course design elements and principles, right? You have a self-paced course, which we have in LE, versus a course that is instructor-led, or even if you have, that one professor who doesn't actually have anything turned in until the midterm, and that midterm is 75% of the grade, right? Knowing those different elements within the course is going to be essential in understanding your map and how you're benchmarking everything. And then learner success. And so this is usually about 1 month out. This is usually folks who don't have as much access to live time or even static data. And so having a product to walk them through that journey is so essential, right? Like I can have a conversation with Pallavi about like, hey, we could potentially do this and this and this, and we could run this query and we could have this over here. And she knows what I'm saying. And likewise, I do as well. But there's some people that we're talking to that they just don't know that, right? And so I always say about a month out, you take a beta, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks, is going around to folks in LE and saying, hey, here's our beta. This is not what it's going to finally look like. This is kind of what it's going to look like. How does this look like in your every single day? And figuring out then what that looks like on the individual, the partner, and then also role identification, right? So who has what access where. Did I miss anything on this part?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I always forget about all the different spaces. Ooh, that's really loud. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about right now, like who are your stakeholders? So thinking through how you would do this in what spaces, how would you have those conversations and what does that look like? We'll give you just like a minute or a minute or two to talk in your groups, and then I am going to ask you to report back out again. I'll use it as a little example of moving through different spaces. All righty, y'all, let's wrap it in a little bit. Again, I love the hums of the talking, brainstorming. Hopefully there's something that are strategizing in this space where this can be used in different spaces. I'll share Paul's email with all of you after this for that. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so talking a little bit about who your stakeholders are. What would that look like in different spaces now that we've kind of thought through learner visualizations and what that could mean? Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, that's a really great example where this could be a huge identification. And it's actually super easy to do it. Like, so the advisors at WP Carey have a little reminder that I left on all of the gatekeeping courses of like, week 3, check the dashboard. Week 4, check this dashboard, right? And so they just know. And then whoever's on it, they send the email and they reach out. Anyone else? Stakeholders? And spaces where you can see it being beneficial. So I'll give 2 case examples really quickly, just so you can see how this manifests in different spaces. The first is what I keep talking about. It's a 15 academic week course in a first year fall semester, right? So y'all know the gatekeeping courses, depending on which college you're associated with, what's going to keep someone in, what's going to transition them out of the work within 15 weeks. So here within week 1, identification of students enrolled but not present to ensure retention cohort was at 100%. We know what happens. We know it's real. It's just a reality. You have to scrub the data to make sure that who we're impacting are actually here in our classes and what that looks like. We were able to do it quick. It used to be check over here, check FOSTA, check our classrooms, check our advisors, check our one-on-one seminar. And so by doing this, it was super easy. You just ran one report on day 20, and by 21st day, we had clean data. Okay, academic intervention. The week 3, targeting all students with D or lower and clearly track courses, resulting in a 17% decrease in those students of concern. So this was just pizza and tutors. That was it. Got USAP tutors in the room, got a bunch of got a bunch of pizza in the room, and we just had the folks hang out together and catch up in the course. And by the end of that one intervention, we had 17% students. And the cohort, the first year cohort that year on ground was 3,900 students. It was the mandated course and all students were enrolled in if they were not there students. So 17% decrease in students concerned was pretty significant for who we were impacting.
So, question on that 17% decrease.
Yeah.
Is that all academic improvement, or was some of that drops in major change?
That's a great question. It was academic. It was those still enrolled and active in the course.
Okay.
Yeah. But it wasn't all academic. That's the important thing to know, is that for some folks, we found out one individual that Paul and I watched for a while, and is still in the university, he's doing well, just didn't have a computer. It was that simple. The guy was trying to do a CIS 105 class without a computer. And so he was walking around his dorm going, can I borrow your computer? Can I borrow your computer? We got him an emergency scholarship. We got him a laptop, and he ended his first year with a B average in all his courses. Otherwise, we would not have known about him until he failed CIS 105, and then the academic advisor would have been triggered to reach out to him. And so we wouldn't have started an intervention with him until December, maybe January, depending on how full staff we were in our academic advising team. So, yeah, it's pretty big. And especially too, I have found, so I've run this now since before the pandemic, so for 4 years, and then moved over to LE in 2019. So what I found is if you can intervene those first couple weeks, you're usually scrubbing for non-achievement based needs. So you're usually identifying little things like, I didn't know we had tutoring, or I've been so stressed out trying to figure out my FAFSA and get my tuition taken care of, or I can't get transferred here. So all of these other kind of BI, like behavioral stuff that support around, usually those are pretty easy to fix, and that's why it's so significant early on. It gets much smaller because later you're talking about academic internal motivation, and that's a whole different conversation. Week 5, we did tutoring-based engagement camps. This is in conjunction with the professor in order to make sure that we could catch everybody up. So no late assignments. If they showed up, don't take any late penalty. They'll just submit it all, and can we catch them all up by this point? And so this was really significant, but it's really important to note we could not have done it if the instructor hadn't agreed, right? And so that's where that 1 month before interaction, you're going around to folks that maybe like the data doesn't make sense to them up front. You can show them a beta product and go, hey, look, I can show you how your course is working. What would you be willing to do this semester with me if I could show you the people that we can impact? And getting them to buy in beforehand, right? So it's predetermined, pre-designed. Can't go to somebody week 4 and go, hey, we've got 200 people. What can we do for them? Right? They're not gonna go on that journey with you. I have found. Maybe you're more persuasive than me. And then another, so this is on ground, right? So this is like throwing a bunch of like tables in a Delphi and saying, hey, come hang out with us. This is an online example. So over the summer, we utilized this. Some of my colleagues had a population of folks that we could work with that were rising juniors into the university. It's the Fleischer Scholars Program. A lot of so the folks that are involved in that program also WP Carey, so they had been on the journey with me when I was doing it on ground and agreed to do it, to embed this design into an 8-week summer bridge program. And so online courses, all on online interaction. It was hybrid though, right? Like I was in this room to launch the cohort. So we had that. Week 1, it's rising seniors who some of them all received computers because they didn't have one otherwise. It's low SES, first generation folks. So some of them hadn't even been on a computer yet. And so we were able to quickly identify who wasn't on the course, send peers out to go have a conversation with them, and then enroll them into the course and just show them how they were able to do it. So our enrollment increased by 98%. We found one individual who they're going to work with who just didn't have the broadband at home to be able to do the pilot, which was our key. And then week 2, we were able to get peer mentors to do tutoring time. It's important here to note that this wasn't passing. This is just engagement. We have 8 weeks, right? If you can't pass Math 117 in 8 weeks, I'm not going to be able to give you the skills to pass Math 117 by the end of that thing. We have to just get you engaged with the content. That's what we have to do. That's all we can focus on in that short realm of time. With 15-week, 16-week course, you can have more impact based on skill development. The window here for me is too tight. And so peer mentors engage, and the percentage decreased to 7% not engaged, right? And it's really simple. They sat down, they had some sandwiches, they logged them in, they showed them how easy it was, and then they were able to do it. And week 3, all students not passing were offered tutoring support in connection to study groups. And so that actually, and success within LE is defined as a C or better. So we were able to get folks to have a C or better in the course. We just ran the analysis across of this particular cohort, and this cohort was 54% more likely to get an A than other learners in similar course in the same course as them. So of the other verified learners, there's a lot of different information about who our learners are. We're open scale, we're open access. There's no application. You can log on, you can be in. So there's little definitions around that, but they were able to succeed at a higher rate than other folks. Any questions on the case examples? Awesome. Then I believe we are pretty much done with our presentation. Any questions overall? And check the chat. Any questions overall for? You can ask them. But yeah, it's that login. That's why that clicks are so important. And that's why that clicks against others are so important, because it might be your course design that's impacting it, right? So maybe we just haven't had any need to be in the course until week 3, which is, by the way, why you got to get rid of those courses. Right? And you have that conversation with that instructor of hey, can we just have a introduction post week 1, please, so I can at least force them to log in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good question though.
Is there a way we can get access to that? Is there a way to share that Tableau workbook so we could manipulate it down to our units data or anything?
Yeah, so if you email me, when Paul is back, we have a couple of sample ones that he can give you access to, but they're the old form of them are back from when him and Tom built these at Plus. So there's one that I know that I could ask Lucy Carey to give us. Ours are still beta and we're still trying to figure stuff out, so I wouldn't be comfortable sharing them out for play yet. But there are some, yes. Yes, just email me. Any questions? Thank you all for being here. Let you get some sugar and some coffee for your next conference, next session. And let us know if you need anything at all. The real genius here, by the way, is I talk a lot, but it's Pallavi. And so if you want to know anything about writing a query or building all this out or the data streams or Redshift, I will not be helpful. I will be cluing you into Pallavi. So please reach out.
If you have any questions related to data or in general, how we would go about building these type of dashboards, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you also very, very much.
Thank you.